Great. Hey, thanks for coming, everyone. We're really excited to be doing this. I'm John.
I'm James.
And I'm going to share the screen with you right now so that you can see our presentation. Let's see. For some reason, Corey, our presentation isn't showing up when I say it here. I know, but that's not sharing. Oh, here it is. Okay, great. Great, okay. We got it. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this to slide. Oh, this is not working. Bear with us here. Sorry about this.
We've all probably had similar problems with Zoom, so I can definitely bear with you.
I'll have. I have it on my computer too, if you all need it.
And Google is kind of difficult.
Yeah, and what happened is I can't figure out how to get the slideshow. So, well, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna have to do it this way because we need to get through this. I'm sorry about this. I'm just gonna have to do it this way because I can't figure out how to get it to the slideshow.
Are you using dual screens?
No, just one, but somehow the menu at the top disappeared, so I can't select slideshow.
Try 12.
What's that?
Try hitting F12 and see if that brings it back.
Okay.
You might need to hit escape first because I saw you go into big screen with this. So I would hit escape first and then F12.
Control F5 starts presentation if you're using Google Slides. In your case, it'd probably be Command F5.
Welcome to VoiceOver. VoiceOver speaks descriptions of items on the screen and can be used to control the computer.
Sorry, I think I'm just gonna have to. This is so frustrating. I'm really sorry, everyone. This is not supposed to be like this, obviously.
It's okay. That is the nature of our world right now.
Yeah. How can I do this to get this back?
Okay, don't sweat it. Just roll through it. It's cool.
Yeah, or I can put it on my computer too. This is Corey.
Is that okay if I just do it like this?
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to do that because I don't want to take up too much time. And of course, this would happen. So, anyways, so we're going to do this training, and I wanted to thank Safe Routes Partnership for welcoming us and reaching out to us to do this. This is really exciting. Walking and biking are near and dear to our hearts. James and I are big walkers and bikers, and before the pandemic started, we were thinking about getting rid of our car, but then the pandemic happened, so we'll do that once it's over. So, James, you want to talk about Place It?
Yeah, so I found this group called idea called Place It, where people use storytelling objects and play as a way to get them to exchange with ideas. I was a transportation planner for LA Metro, and where I worked with a lot of immigrants, and a lot of immigrants didn't want to really talk at meetings. So to help them articulate themselves, I had them build. Because I learned from artists that building is a way to get people to express themselves. They started this method maybe 10 years ago, using objects to get people to tell stories about places. And it really goes into it really tackles their deep relationship with space. And so you'll hear more about later on.
Yeah, and and then my business is called Prairie Form. I started this in 2008 doing landscape and urban design. The big change that's really happened over the course of the past 12 years is that what started as kind of a top-down approach to landscape and urban design is much more rooted in engaging everyone in the process. So I do things like landscapes that don't use irrigation, looking at concepts like plant succession and weeds, looking at how cultivated plant or cultivars and wild plants interact with each other. And then I engage people in different ways in all of those things. So I do day-long trainings on creating irrigation-free landscapes. I do things called weed walkabouts, where we go out and look at all the weeds growing in urban neighborhoods and looking at how that's a kind of nature too. Even though it's overlooked, it's still nature. And then of course, this kind of work in engaging everyday people in their surroundings and how those surroundings influence how they experience the world and also how they can shape their urban surroundings. So what we're going to be looking at today is how you can use this method that we have, the Placeit method, to engage people, students, parents, and staff, teachers in Safe Routes to School. And so we're going to learn how to use the model building workshop method to engage them. And then we're going to go and see how this can actually generate really interesting ideas for shaping our surroundings and moving away from enforcement and more so towards design and different modifications in the public realm that can influence relative safety and pleasantness when it comes to walking, biking to school. Or as Corey said, walking and rolling, which I like much better. That's actually awesome. So what we're going to be covering today, we've done the intro. We're going to just do a little intro about what this is, and then we're going to look into the psychology of working with our hands versus just talking and how that influences outcomes. And then we're going to do an overview of the model building workshop. And so when it can be used, some sample prompts, materials, and then looking at some different considerations when it comes to equity and then unearthing community assets. And then we're going to do a sample workshop, so you guys are going to be able to take part in one. And we'll look at the recurring themes that come out of those. And then outcomes. So a lot of people are really curious about outcomes for this kind of method because we use found objects and these things that are kind of loosey-goosey. And so people are always like, well, how does this lead to outcomes? So we'll talk about the different kinds of outcomes that can emerge, and those can be both tangible and intangible. So changes in the physical environment, but also changes within ourselves. And then we'll talk about some success stories from different communities. So James is just going to talk a little bit how this method actually evolved.
Okay, so yes, I've been building models since I was a kid, and it's a way for me to really kind of express myself or really think about the built environment in a very different way. Some people draw cities, some people play in them, but I kind of built them. And I kind of developed this method of kind of learning about cities, learning about space from a very tactile experience. So I think a lot of children use their hands and their bodies to really understand the built environment. And that's exactly what I did to start my art practice, using, which I really refined later on, but using this kind of really tactile way of understanding cities through objects of space. So the whole idea is to get people thinking about, their relationship to the built environment. It's how do you connect to the world around you? How does your body connect to the world around you? As a woman, as a boy, as a little girl, what's connecting you to that space, and what's that relationship all about? And how can you articulate that relationship? I think for a lot of kids, it's really important for them to have different ways to express themselves.
So the next part, I just want to go very briefly into this. This is just going to be a quick overview, so this isn't like in-depth psychology, but just what happens in our brains when we work with our hands versus when we talk. So when we just talk about what we want to see in the world around us, we're really using basically the prefrontal cortex of our brains. And So this regulates emotions. It keeps us focused on survival and keeps us really focused on ourselves. And it really keeps us focused on just the here and now. It doesn't really help us think beyond what we see in front of our noses. So for adults, you know, when we think about community meetings and we ask people what they want in their communities, this is a lot of times what they say they want. They want this open road with no traffic, and this is like the dream for people, or they think it's the dream. So for kids, they can actually imagine quite easily, and we know this, you know, anyone who's worked with kids knows this, or if you're a parent. But for adults, the prefrontal cortex is fully formed, and that can really hamper creative thinking. So working with our hands gets us out of this survival mode and activates different parts of our brains and gets us thinking bigger about our surroundings. And what happens then is we can sink into a state of play, and we can actually get out of survival mode and then into being really expansive with our thinking and also playing with others. And then we can be collaborative and aspirational as opposed to just talking about what we ourselves want. And we can also tap into core values. So how we use this in the Playset Model Building Workshop is we do a hands-on workshop involving found objects, and so people use these found objects to build memories and ideas. So some of the contexts in which it can be used, so you can use this kind of workshop for broad visioning. You can use it for an establishment of core values in a community. You can use it for designs for sure, so it can be early on in the process or it can be later in the process. And this also is really helpful for bringing groups together and improving group cohesion, so team building and bonding. So some of the prompts that we use for the model building exercises, the typical one that we use at the very beginning is to build your favorite childhood memory. We like to start with a memory because that takes everyone to essentially a happy place, and it really levels the playing field. And then some of the other ones that we use are like build your ideal street, and this can be done in a group or it can be done on your own. You can build your ideal neighborhood and build your first memory of a mobility experience. So the materials that you need are actually super simple. So we just use found objects, and that's what you guys are going to be using today for the mock workshop. So anything around you, so it can be hair rollers, pipe cleaners, pens, pencils, paper, corks, wine corks, things like that. And then we use sheets of construction paper when we do these in person as a base for your model. And then this is just a sample setup. I love this image right here because it just shows how people get into this kind of meditative state when they do this, no matter who they are. And so they've got their bases there for their models, and then they've got all the materials in the middle that they're picking from. So it is helpful if you do this in person, and hopefully we'll be doing that sooner than later, is to have a whiteboard or a flip chart for recording the ideas and memories that people come up with. And the great thing about this method too is that in terms of equity and inclusion, it's really a way of leveling the playing field. It's not like a design charrette where there's some prior design experience that's needed. Here, there's no prior design experience needed. So people of all ages, all backgrounds can participate. The emphasis is not on perfection, the emphasis is on expression. So we're not looking for things that are perfectly to scale. Everyone participates, so it's not a competition. Everyone gets to share their ideas and what they've built. And it's tactile, not talk-based, so it naturally favors collaboration. And it also favors people who might feel more comfortable working with their hands than speaking. And there are actually a lot of people who don't feel comfortable speaking in front of a group. So this is a way to take some of that fear away and not put so much pressure on participants to be super articulate in front of large groups. They can use their hands as a way to communicate. So it also is a really great way of unearthing community assets. So if you do like a general visioning exercise for this, you can really create a sense of cohesion, but also get a better sense of what the core values of the community are. And the other thing too is that when you mine those core values, you can see that they're shared. So you might come into a room and do this workshop, or even today, for example, we do it online. Everyone seems like strangers. After you've done this exercise where you build, say, your favorite childhood memory, you really see that there are a lot of things that are shared among you. And then it's very visionary, so it never favors people being negative. It favors people being expansive and visionary with their thinking, and that's very natural. We never tell people don't be negative. It's just automatic because people are working with their hands, and that's a really pleasant place for people to be. The outcomes are always positive. So what we do with these model building exercises is not just engage people in the actual exercise, but we want them to be able to pull out recurring themes so that they can start to see connections. So what initially might seem like disparate ideas suddenly become things that have some commonalities. And then, of course, the common ground and the shared values can be established. And if you're doing this as like general visioning, the themes can really be something that you can pull out to use as guides for the longer term of the project. So we're actually on time. So despite the technical glitches at the beginning, we're pretty much on time here. So we're going to dive in to the sample workshop right now. I know you guys all have instructions, but I'm just going to go over them just so we can explain them a little bit. So we're going to be doing 2 prompts. So you're going to build 2 models. The first one is you're going to build your first memory of a mobility experience. So it could be good or bad. I mean, generally they tend to be on the positive side, but I think the whole idea here is really to tap into your memory of something where you were moving around through the city, through your neighborhood, whatever it is. So it could be everything from being pushed around a stroller, which we had one participant build once, or it could be riding your bike with your parents, or it could be the first time you're able to ride your bike on your own away from your parents. It doesn't really matter, but we're going to do that first. And then we're going to do build your ideal walk or bike ride to school. And I think we'll take Corey's language and say walk or roll to school. So if it's rollerblading, skateboarding, that kind of thing, that's totally cool too. And so, of course, we're going to break out into smaller groups. And these are some samples of models. So this is Corey's or Michelle's, I think. Did you guys want to chime in and just explain what you guys built here?
Yeah, that's mine. I am Michelle. So I built my first memory of walking from the preschool, which is the green part on the right there, over to an office complex. It was Halloween, and we got to walk from our school over to an office complex and go trick-or-treating along the way with our friends. And so we got to hold a long rope with knots tied on it so we didn't bunch up together, but got to walk out on the street and walk around our neighborhood around our school. It's pretty fun.
Nice, that's great. And then Corey.
Yeah, so this one's my model. And one of my first experiences, it's actually more about learning how to ride a bike. So when I was younger, like my favorite movie was The Sound of Music. And the kids in the movie would always be like riding on bikes in like, you know, the Austrian countryside. And I wanted to ride bikes like the kids in Sound of Music are riding bikes. So whenever I'd watch the movie and the kids would be on their bikes, I would like run to the garage and like ride my bike too. So I felt like I was like riding bikes with the Von Trapp children in The Sound of Music. This is my interpretation of like the Austrian countryside that I imagined I was in, even though I was like just in my garage in Maryland. So yeah, I used scarves, cotton balls. I have house plants there, like a lid from a jar of jam, a computer holder. So again, just like, you know, regular things I found around home. So yeah, that is my one of my first experiences of learning how to ride a bike.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, so those are 2 super awesome memories and models. And hopefully that gives you an idea of the kind of freeform nature of this. So you can use stuff that's representational. It doesn't have to be literal. And so how this is gonna work, so you're gonna build the models in response to prompt 1, and then you're gonna share with the folks in your group what you've built. And then you'll have a discussion in which you pull out the recurring themes. And then it would be great if one person per group could volunteer to write down the ideas in the chat and to write down the themes. And then later on, you can copy and paste those into the main chat so that we have a record of them. And also just for folks in your breakout group, they can refer to them along the way if they need to. And then we'll do the second model building exercise in response to prompt 2. And same thing, so you'll share the models and pull out the recurring themes. And then we'll reconvene and share some of the ideas of the models we built and also themes with the larger group. So the breakdown here, we're gonna do 10, 10, and 10. So we might have to do a little bit, have it be a little bit shorter, but we're relatively on track here, so it should be okay. So these are the prompts, and so Corey, whenever you're ready, you can, we're ready to break folks out into groups.
All right, 1 second. I also put a link to the breakout group instructions in the chat box. So make sure that you click on that link before you go into the breakout room, because it might disappear, possibly. Alrighty, let's get these open. And again, if anybody has questions or needs anything while you're in your breakout group, just put up the Ask for Help button and we'll get to you. And I will send out a few time reminders as you all are working. Otherwise, enjoy playing and building. Make sure that you click on the instructions. We'd also love if you all would want to take a few photos and share them with us. We also put a link in the instructions for a Google Drive folder for you to upload photos of your models. So if you're so inclined to share with us, feel free to upload some photos of your models too. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms, and we will see you all in a bit. Enjoy.
Green space and plants were big in ours, and also shops. Lots of people talked about stopping for ice cream, stopping for candy, stopping for donuts, or just grabbing coffee. And then the other one that was really big was a lot of people talked about being with other people.
Right.
Yeah, definitely all of those. And also I think for some folks, like an element of safety concerns, whether of clear memory of a safe place, like a bike path, or concerns that adults that they were with were worried about, traffic or something like that in the mobility experience.
Right. Absolutely. So, the interesting thing about this, and we do this exercise for a lot of reasons. So one is, for you guys to see the commonalities amongst all of these different memories and also these different models, but also especially with transportation, to look at the fact that when we actually think about what we like about moving around in a city, in the suburbs, somewhere, it's always more than just getting from point A to point B, right? So when we plan as transportation planners, when they plan, the starting point is so often just we need to get people from point A to point B as fast as possible. But when we uncover all these memories and these things, we see that that's not actually what people want. So when we think about this vis-a-vis then our cities and where we live, it's then we can start thinking about all these different details and things that can go into making our walks, our bikes, our rolls to school, elsewhere, fun experiences where we can hang out with people along the way, where there are destinations, things to look at, things that spark your curiosity, and so on and so forth. James.
I think also this is also a time when kids are learning about relationships. You know, how does my body connect to the world around me? You know, to the plants, to other people. But this is like their aha moment. You know, and walking to school can be a rich part of their whole childhood development. Because they have to do this, and they're going to learn, you know, just by walking with the world around them. I think that's one part of urban planning that's missed is how do we build relationships between people and our built environment around us, which is critical to make us feel good and make us feel that we belong somewhere. So kids have this intuitive sense to really think about the world that way, and that's how the adults we think about the world the same way, except that as adults we forget about that.
The other thing too, with the pulling out of the recurring themes, just from the perspective of you guys leading these workshops, it's really important to not shortchange this part of the exercise. So give people enough time to be able to think critically and ask them, you know, what are the recurring themes, and don't tell them, have them pull the themes out, and that can give them a sense of ownership of the overall process and really help them make all these connections in their mind. Oh, okay, that's right. That actually connects to this, and this memory, even though it's different from mine, is actually very similar.
So I think getting back to Hannah's question, I think it might be interesting to do like a combination online Zoom activity like this, and then have a face-to-face activity where people are now prepped to understand how do we actually design our safe routes to our school. Because now that we kind of understand, you know, what we want to see there and what we want to feel there, now people can go into the planning process with the transportation planners ready to articulate what they want to see, rather than not being really sure. But this way, the people are ready for it. But they've kind of bonded, they've learned from each other, and they kind of use their hands, and now they're ready to kind of go out there and do the actual planning.
Yeah. And the other thing too, if you do this in person, so with the second exercise where you build an ideal street, an ideal walk and roll to school, that's typically done as a group. So we usually do that in groups of 3, 4, or 5, probably not more than 5. And then the group together then presents the model, and everyone has a chance to talk about what they all built. And the interesting thing about that too is that when we talk about, let's say, an ideal street, there tends to be a lot of competition. But across all ages, when you work in a group and you build, everyone's ideas get to be a part of that model. And people tend to not be competitive at all with each other. So they listen more, they're more open to other people's ideas. So it's definitely something that's really worth exploring once you are able to meet all together physically and try it out. So we're going to move on to the last part of the presentation. And while you guys were in your groups, I think I ironed out the technical difficulties with the Google Slides. So it should work now. So let me just hope that this works. All right, so here we are. Great. So about outcomes. So you've done the workshop, you've had people go through the recurring themes. What are some of the outcomes that you can expect and that you can anticipate? So obviously themes, values, and ideas are things that can come out of this, but also you could have actual plans, drawings, designs, physical changes in the landscape could be a long-term outcome of this. So this drawing is actually one that I did for a project that James and I did in South Colton in Southern California. So this was a street section that ultimately came out of a series of model building workshops that we did with residents down there in South Colton. Other outcomes can be intangible, but actually really just as important as the physical ones. So a sense of your own design and planning capacity. So everyone has this in themselves, and it's just a question of tapping into it and pulling it out. So a lot of these kids, I mean, they probably never knew that they could actually plan and design, but here they are. They just designed an ideal street here. And then, of course, we talked about this too today, about camaraderie and group cohesion and shared values. And then just joy, right? So there is a level of just happiness and joy that comes out of these workshops, and the mood at the beginning of the workshop versus the mood at the end a lot of times is just a lot higher at the end. People feel a sense of satisfaction, camaraderie. And then how do you record outcomes? So in person, we tend to use a whiteboard or a flip chart that's visible to everyone. So you can see right here, we've got all the ideas that are summarized underneath the names of the participants. And it's great to have this so that everyone can see, so you can kind of see the board being filled as people talk. And then you can reference back to this, refer back to this when you pull out the recurring themes. And then when you do the team-based models, then write down the same thing. You write down the summaries and the names of the people in the teams. And then you write down the themes. So for Zoom, as we've done today, you can write the memories and themes in the chat, and then of course record it. And then you can save these outcomes for whatever further engagement activities you do. So as far as recording the less tangible outcomes, so you can use photo and video to document changes in mood and attitude. That's an option that you could use. So we tend to take a lot of photos when we do our in-person workshops. And this is at the end of a workshop. You can see everyone is, we didn't tell anyone to smile for this photo, they just smiled. Another option that you can do is exit interviews if you're trying to assess maybe a change in attitude, a change in confidence, these kinds of things that are very intangible. You could try to use an exit interview. Oops, looks like someone's.
We're gone to the.
Okay. Then another thing that you could do is a model building exercise as an exit interview. So you could have participants build their favorite part of the activity and tell them why. The reason why we do this sometimes is that it can be hard for people to articulate how they feel about an experience just through words, but if they are able to use their hands and build it, they might be able to better articulate how they felt about the overall experience of the model building workshop. And so we're going to end, before we get to the Q&A, just a couple success stories. So this is well, the first one I'll talk about, then James will talk about the next one. So this is a California Avenue bike ped underpass in Palo Alto, California. So what we were trying to do here is generate creative solutions to a space that was kind of contested. So it's a shared bike ped space, and there have been a lot of conflicts between bicyclists and pedestrians. So there's Hannah. So we held 2 model building workshops first. We did one with younger users of the space, and then we did one with older users of the space. And so for the first workshop, we actually didn't use any prompts that had to do with the actual bike ped underpass. We used prompts, the same one actually we did today, build a memory of a mobility experience. And then for the second one, we did build a shared bike ped space, but not the actual underpass in question. And then on a separate day, we brought both groups together to the actual site, to the underpass, and we led them through an exercise in which we explored the actual underpass with our senses. And so this is one of the participants here talking about his favorite spot in the underpass and why. And then after that, we did a model building activity where they redesigned the underpass. And to start with the workshop, we actually went over the recurring themes from the previous workshops and showed that the older folks and the younger folks all essentially wanted the same things for the space. And it was pretty incredible because the space had been, there'd been a lot of conflicts within the space. And by the end of this workshop, or the series of workshops, there wasn't any conflict. There were just a lot of really creative ideas for the space. And so this is one of the models that folks built. And then James is going to talk about this one.
Yeah, this is a project I did. I started 5 years ago or 6 years ago. The city of Phoenix built this really beautiful disability center, recreation center of people with disabilities, and across the street was a light rail line, but there was no light rail stop. So the people with disabilities use light rail a lot. So we did it. What happened? So a couple of years later, and about 5 years ago, I did a workshop with people with disabilities. I told them, build your ideal rail station based on your disability. There's some folks, have trouble walking or seeing or different issues. So they built their ideal station about what they wanted to see. And afterwards, they were so excited. For 5 years, they lobbied the city of Phoenix and the Valley Metro to build a new station there. So just last year, they broke ground for the 50th Avenue station, and it's designed by them for them. But how to be able to look at their issue and put it into a positive spin and then design something, they went forward and did this. So now they have a beautiful station next to their station, which wasn't there before. So the whole idea is getting people to kind of visualize their kind of intuitive feelings about something and how to change it.
So another thing to add to, so we were writing a book we finished writing and announced in production a book for Island Press, and we went back and interviewed some of the participants for this workshop. And one thing that really came out of this process of the Place It workshop with them, and then finally with this actual station they got, is that they said they have such a huge level of independence now that they didn't have before, because before they had to be driven around by a parent, they had to use some sort of van sharing service, or they had to take, say, like 3 buses to get to the center. And this is in Phoenix, and obviously in the summertime it gets incredibly hot. So it was actually kind of dangerous for a lot of people to be outside that much and having to transfer on and off of 3 buses just to get there. So a couple of things before we wrap up. So there is going to be a PDF companion that's on the way, and that's going to, so if you didn't have a chance to take a ton of notes for this, that will be coming, and then you'll be able to use that if you have any questions about just the ins and outs of these methods and how to use them, materials, and so on and so forth. And then we are going to be making a video about engaging people with their senses and exploring bikeability, walkability, and their surroundings. And that will be coming out in a couple months. So that's it. This is our contact info right here. And we have a book coming out later this year. And so now we can open it up to questions. We have about 10 minutes left. So if folks have questions, we're happy to.
I'll read off 2 questions from the chat box I saw. One is tips or thoughts on having people who speak multiple languages or different languages in the workshop.
Okay, so interestingly enough, we have actually rarely used a translator because it seems like when people have the objects, they're able to use those as a way to talk. They can talk off of them and they don't have to rely just on words alone. But occasionally we have had translators, and that's like perfectly doable. So we did a workshop recently in Oregon, and it was probably half English speaking, well, probably 3/4 English speaking and 1/4 Spanish speaking. So one of the people we worked with, she spoke Spanish, so she was able to translate back and forth.
Yeah, and plus also, you're not translating technical language, so people can express themselves through the objects. And usually, if people talk for a minute. My walk to school was this, and those are really easy to translate into Spanish or different languages. So you're not trying to do a technical planning document and translate it. So this is really minimal, I find, and I actually designed this for immigrants because I found immigrants really couldn't express themselves at meetings. So using their hands and objects, it became easier for them to really express how they felt about issues. So it's a different way of communicating.
Another question from the chat box. Great story from Phoenix. Speaking of people with different abilities, how would you recommend engaging people who are blind in the workshop?
Well, I think in the Phoenix workshop, we had people that were blind, and there was the whole idea of touching things and being really tactile became really important to them. Because using their user, so people with disabilities have different kind of sensibilities and how to get around. So they have hyper awareness for how to touch or how to hear if you're blind. So people are using different parts of their body And the materials allow them to use them in different ways. Some folks are using their elbows to move objects around. Some folks use different types of, different configurations. So I think, yeah, just having touch is another way to express themselves.
Another thing too is that I showed photos of the exercise we did in Palo Alto where we explored a space with our senses. So that's another activity that you can do where, let's say you're looking at a street, or you're looking at, it could be just outside, any kind of space, any kind of physical space. You bring people to that space and you have them find a spot that they like within the space, but really using their senses as opposed to just thinking about it. So that would be another option to use for people who can't see, because then they can tap into all the other senses to find a spot within that space that they like, and then talk about what it is about their senses that kind of lights up in that space.
Yeah, just kind of using your material to really articulate what that experience is like, touching something or feeling something, when not be able to see it.
Great. Scrolling through. Another question here. How do you think we can accomplish something similar to the exercise we did during COVID, where residents don't have access to internet services? So something with physical distancing, yet not depending on internet.
Yeah, you can actually do workshops in parks or in public spaces, and just have everybody 6 feet apart. And you can also have like family pods. I did a workshop in San Jose. We did it in a big space that had a lot of ventilation, and all the tables are 6 feet apart from each other. So we're able to do a safe distance, physical, face-to-face workshop. That's possible because the materials and you could do them on a lawn, in a park, or in almost anywhere, in the street corner, anywhere, driveway.
Yeah. Great. And James, I actually went to something where we had one of your models out for like a day-long festival. And so people could come and go and play stuff as they were there. So definitely an opportunity to space people out in time.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. That's great. Yeah.
Let's see. Another question, best way to get buy-in from city staff and departments on community-led safe routes projects?
I think involving them from the beginning is really important. So if you can have city staff be a part of these workshops so they can really see and experience this process, that's really crucial. Because it's one thing for us to talk about this process and say, oh, it's really great. I mean, of course we like it because this is what we do, but that aside, we can tell someone if we're blue in the face that this is really effective, but if they are able to experience it themselves, they from the get-go can see the value in it. And then that value can be carried out throughout the entire process.
Yeah, I think also, for planners, as a planner, we take pride in knowing something, but not feeling the space. So this whole idea is to really get people to understand how the space actually feels. What it feel like walking down the street. And I think that's a really important part of mobility, is how a place feels. And we're trying to capture, articulate those experiences we'll have our feelings rather than just kind of knowing the place. And plus, also, I think when you're creating more transparency in the design process, because you're kind of seeing how design get generated and how they go through the process of being vetted out and to a final product, which is really cool.
I'm a former employee of a city in the suburb of Cleveland, and actually led the Safe Routes to Schools planning program. One thing that got the buy-in is that we incorporated not only the city as a part of the process, and I led it, but we also, of course, had our schools, our libraries, our YMCAs, our businesses, because everyone had to have some buy-ins, including our hospitals that were in the neighborhood, and our community members, whether they were residential, and also our students were also involved in that process. So the cities get on board when they see the stakeholders around them on board. So it's easy to get your libraries, your schools, because they are critical to the process of developing safe routes, not only for the children, but the residuals are for the residents as well. So you know, when you take it from that vantage point and not come in and plop something down, but you incorporate all the stakeholders, it makes it easy for a city to get involved.
If I can jump in from the law enforcement perspective, because I'm from Garden Grove PD, we have done several of these safe route projects and brought police, fire, school district, the hospital, the urban planners, our PTAs, our community action groups in some of our faith-based communities to get input so that everyone kind of feels they're included in this. But from the law enforcement aspect, you definitely have to bring in your police and fire, because your changes could impact the way they respond to your calls for service. So that's definitely a person you need to have at the table. Remember that.
The law enforcement, our law enforcement were engaged, as well as our first responders were engaged in the process. So again, thinking about all the community stakeholders, being a part of the planning process is critical whenever you're talking about developing multiple modalities to transportation, because that's how they look at it. It's modalities, multiple modalities to transportation.
Yeah, and I think also you could look at this activity as a social event. It's like a party, and everybody wants to go to a party, right? Everybody wants to meet people and talk to people and know who's in the room. So you could look at it as kind of a happy hour social event rather than just this, rather than this kind of problem. But just look at it as a social event. So people like to socialize.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to piggyback off that, when we interviewed folks from Mobility 360 for the book, they said had the exercise or the activity just been, you know, go and listen to a presentation and ask questions, they wouldn't have gotten the turnout that they got.
We're excited.
So people were excited. They were going to be able to work with their hands. They were going to be able to be creative. It makes people feel, and they are, I mean, they feel like they're really a part of the process, as opposed to just sort of there to provide minimal input, you know, just to kind of tick off a box. So it gives people a sense of their really important role in the overall process.
Because not only are you thinking about, you know, the development of safe routes, but you also have to think about the policy aspects that may have to change in a city. So it's very crucial, again, that city planners, those who are involved, are thinking about policies, because that's not just for a city, but that's also for schools, because some schools don't have policies for children walking to school. So again, it's all encompassing, but it has to start with, again, those stakeholders being at the table and talking about how they are going to be included in that process of developing.
Yeah,
and planning.
Also, I think this also teaches people about themselves and their relationship to the built environment around them. So, you know, so people learn about themselves and they could take this beyond just safe out to school. Oh yeah, that's why I like parks, and that's why I like to do this and do that. Because you give them time to reflect about their own life and their own experiences and how they shape the way they look at the world. So we tell people, your favorite child memory is your DNA for city planner. You can look for that memory the rest of your life, consciously or subconsciously. But that's the driver in how you look at the world. And having to be able to articulate that and remember that really gives people an idea that, you know, this is how I look at, this is how I fit in this whole urban picture, this whole picture with everything. So it gives people a way to learn about themselves and others too.
Well, it's 11:29, and we said we'd be done at 11:30, so I don't want to overstay our welcome here. So we can, if everyone's cool with it, we can wrap up. You have our contact info, so if something comes up that you want to ask us a question about, or, you know, bounce an idea off of us, feel free. You can definitely contact us, and it's been really fun. I've loved hearing about everyone's ideas, and especially this discussion we just had about kind of the nuts and bolts of things, because we did the fun part, but of course there is always the nuts and bolts aspect of things that we have to consider. So And I really appreciate everyone's participation and enthusiasm with all this as well. It's been great. So, yeah.
Everyone, and a big thank you to John and James. This was a really fun and interesting and engaging experience. So thank you for guiding us all through it. As I mentioned at the top of our session, we did record this, so it'll be available on our website either this afternoon or tomorrow. We put the links if you want to send your photos of your models. Please feel free to upload them to Google Drive or to email us at info@saferoutespartnership.org. And again, thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.